Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Have you seen 4Low magazine yet? 4Low magazine is a high-quality, well-written, four-wheel drive-focused magazine for the enthusiast market. If you still love the idea of a printed magazine, something to save and read at any time, 4Low is the magazine for you. 4Low cannot be found in stores, but you can have it delivered to your home or place of business. Visit 4lowmagazine.com to order your subscription today. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, I get the pleasure to introduce somebody I've known for quite a while. Not as good as I'd like to know him, but we're going to change that, and it's Boyd Jaynes. Boyd is a renowned automotive photographer worldwide, has done some phenomenal stuff. If you ever saw Masterpiece in Metals, that's Boyd. Publisher and off-road racer. So we're going to talk to Boyd about all of his experiences, his backgrounds, and some of that we share kind of, and this will be fun. So Boyd, thank you so much for coming on board and spending some time with us.
Well, cool, Richard. It's fun to be here. So thanks for having me.
So first off, the question I ask everybody is, where were you born and raised? Where was your upbringing?
Well, I was coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, I was actually born in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. I was born in Livonia. My parents moved to California when I was very young. I sometimes say thankfully because I do love California so much. I love the ocean and the beach, which is I've lived close to most of my life. But yeah, I still consider myself, got Detroit in my veins. And like I said, it's perhaps no coincidence I ended up in an automotive space. A lot of my relatives in one way or another were involved in the automotive industry, as a lot of people are in that area. It's kind of unavoidable. It's such a huge industry. And in fact, my grandma worked at the Detroit plant, or I can't remember which one. I think it was in Dearborn, but she worked in the executive dining room and actually served food to Henry Ford back in the day. So kind of a cool connection.
So that bring us back into the off-road racing then. So, but we'll get to that. How old were you when your parents made the move from Detroit to California?
I think I want to say I was probably 2 or 3.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, very young.
Your real memories are from California.
Yes, exactly. I struggle with saying I'm from Detroit when in fact, really I was raised in California and kind of a California kid through and through.
I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco, but I still say I'm from Placerville, 126 miles away up in the mountains where I'm at now.
Well, that's pretty amazing. And in fact, when we moved to California, the first place we lived was in Almaden, which is up in that area.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then shortly after that, made our way down to Orange County, San Juan Capistrano.
Oh, that's a good area to be in then. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's where I spent most of my life, San Juan Capistrano and San Clemente, Dana Point. Lived in all those places for various amounts of time.
So that means you had a skateboard and a surfboard.
Still do.
Yep. Perfect. You can't give them up if you're in that area.
No, it's kind of hard. I mean, geez, it's an activity you spend most of your life striving to do great lengths to do every day. It's kind of something that every kid does around in this area, and boy, it's tougher to do as you get older. Though I don't step on skateboard very often anymore because I just know better.
You know, falling in the water and falling on pavement. Now, if you're going really fast, like behind us, some kind of a ski boat that does over 60 miles an hour, hitting the water can be painful. But pavement from, your feet are 6-8 inches off the ground and you hit the pavement, and it's a lot rougher than it is hitting water most of the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially if you're falling from the top of a pool to the bottom of the pool. And I skated half pipes and pools, and boy, we skated on giant sewer pipes that were on the back of a train in the yard in Capistrano Beach when we were younger. And I found out what it feels like to crash on just about every surface.
So let's go into school. What kind of a student were you?
Not a very good one when it
Right.
comes to your bread and butter traditional academics. I was terrible. I do remember in high school having to go and visit. I think it was my history teacher to and literally had my cap and gown that I just picked up from where all the seniors would pick up their grad equipment. I think I had my cap and gown under my arm and went to see my history teacher and went, well, and he said something to the effect of, you just scraped by. And I did a little fist bump when, yes, I'm graduating. So, yeah, I was not a very good student. I wasn't interested in much that they were teaching. It's embarrassing, but I do remember actually purposely doing bad in some of my advanced placement classes because none of the kids in those classes were anybody I was interested in hanging out with. My friends were in regular classes, and I just didn't have any interest in staying in the classes, which was kind of, in hindsight was stupid, but was again more interested in getting out of school and going climbing someone's fence and skating their ankle.
Right. And what in what led you into photography in your early years? Was it shooting, skating, and surfing?
For sure, that was something that I did early on, but I think really further back than that, my mom is an artist. She was always drawing and painting, and along with that, she always had a camera laying around. It was helpful for her to shoot some of her subjects, especially things that were in changing light or something she couldn't keep set up or whatever it was. She would shoot photos of it, and she always had a camera lying around. And I was always frustrated because I really aspired to be an artist like my mom, but I couldn't draw to save my life. And ended up picking up her camera here and there, and then eventually got one of my own for Christmas. And I guess back when I was probably from 11 till about 15 or so, I was very interested in scuba diving and thought I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. And I spent my summers on Catalina Island at a summer camp, the Catalina Island Marine Institute, where they teach young kids how to scuba dive and about marine biology and things like that. But one of the things they had there was underwater photography. And so I got really very interested in underwater photography. And of course, that translated over to taking my cheap little Minolta 110 waterproof camera out into the surf break to shoot my friends surfing. But really, I think that was probably the genesis, was my mom and my frustration that I couldn't draw.
I get that. My avenue into photography was I used to pencil and draw with pen and ink, that kind of thing, and I did a lot of landscape. So I'd have my parents drive me out to someplace and they'd come pick me up in 2 or 3 hours. And, I really liked the perspective of, atmospheric perspective. And so I was always trying to recreate that. And then I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm going to take my dad's camera and I'm just going to shoot it. We'll drive around, I'll shoot a bunch of them, and then I'll just, do it off of the slides. And that is where I realized that I could never draw as well as I could shoot. My eye was better behind the camera than it was, translating from the eye through the brain to my hands.
I think I had a similar realization, very similar, Rich. That once I and I really do miss the process of photography back then, where you'd shoot a roll of film, and I'm much older than some people think, but back I used to, a lot of times we would mail our film off to some distant lab to be processed and then come back many weeks later, depending upon what kind of film it was, and the magic of seeing those images when they came out spilling out of an envelope was pretty cool. And I agree, I was like, wow, this is bitchin', I can do this, as opposed to any time I picked up any kind of a pencil or pen, I was just frustrated.
Right, I get it. That's I don't know how many photographers get started that way, but there was at least a handful in my class at Brooks. But
yeah, I imagine. Although I know of several photographers who are frustratingly very talented with a pen on paper as well, which does come in handy when it comes in terms of communicating things to clients or fleshing out ideas or compositions, being able to do something like that. And I find myself even limited in those respects too.
Yeah, for a while I was about 5 years I was a landscape contractor, and in Northern California, and they, customers would hire me, we'd walk their property, and then I'd say, okay, I'll do a drawing that'll represent what we've talked about. And the architectural type drawing where you look, basically straight down on things, I could nail. Sure. I could nail the perspective of standing there and looking straight at it, but it was more of the angular that I had issues with. But when I shoot my photography, I'm always shooting from angles. Nothing in that same perspective as I can draw. So
yeah, I get it. I can totally relate.
So after high school, did you you spent your time surfing and that kind of stuff? I got to ask, what was your first car?
My first car was a Toyota pickup truck.
Oh, nice.
I had jobs very early on. I even, as in working in restaurants primarily as a busboy or whatever, but I've even bought myself a little Honda scooter before I even had a driver's license. It was funny. I kind of railroaded my mom to thinking it was legal. She even took me to the dealership, and I bought this little scooter and promptly got pulled over. And it's funny because I remember that the little scooter was so small that the cop was able to pick it up and stick it in the trunk of his car. It was back when there was actually a police department in San Clemente. They had their own police, and it was still kind of a small town. And he said, "Oh, I knew you just looked too young." And then he just put my scooter in the trunk and drove me home. My mom saw this cop pull up and pull me out of the car, and it was pretty funny. But yeah, so I had jobs, I had my own money, so a couple of years later, I actually went and bought a used Toyota pickup truck. And I don't think it took very long before I had put stickers on it and tried to make it look like Ivan Stewart's stadium truck or something, because I was a fan of all of that even back then. One of the first things we did when we got our driver's licenses was go to Mexico, go to Baja. For me, it was in the beginning to go diving. I used to go down to go spearfishing and go get scallops and cook them on the beach and do all the things that Baja had to offer in terms of that. and then quickly learned that there was, it was pretty easy to go watch off-road racing down there, and have spent many, nights and early mornings out in Ojos camping with all locals, and, sitting on the tailgate of buddy's pickup truck and watching them come through the rollers out there, even back then. But yeah, I think it was some foreshadowing, really.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't get a chance to go to Baja until 2003 was my first trip, and
Oh,
that
wow.
was with BFG.
Well, it's funny, during COVID, I actually had a personal project to go through. I had just giant boxes of film and prints and just stuff I never threw away or never really went through. They just were places where I placed things, and never organized it, anything like that. And I think I spent the better part of 2 months sitting in the center of my garage with a couple of folding tables and a light box, and just went through all this old stuff, all the way back to those envelopes of prints from when I was younger, to big giant, banker's box full of boxes of slides from my professional jobs that I never threw away, even the outtakes. So I had all kinds of stuff, but I remember I ran across some stuff that I shot back then at Ojos. There's some pretty cool old photos, of Ivan, going off one of the rollers with the helicopter in the background, and pictures of my buddies and I down there doing all kinds of shenanigans. But yeah, it's a long time ago. But that was really, really fun. Baja was a lot more wild, a lot closer to the border back then. It's hardly recognizable in most places these days.
Yeah, especially if you've been going that long.
Yeah.
Just from 2003 to when I went down for the 50th. Was it the 50th? Yeah, I think it was the 50th with for the 1,000 and score. It was it seemed like things had changed a lot. There was pavement.
Yeah.
There was pavement down to, down the east side. There used to be
Yes.
there was nothing after,
Yeah. I think
far.
one of the things that it has really been a bummer for me in recent years is the highway being paved there in Portocitos and past Gonzaga, and bypassing past Cocos and all that. I mean, that area has dramatically changed. It was, even though it wasn't a terrible road, but it was pretty brutal on cars, just washboard, and it just kept people from going down there who weren't prepared to go. And now you go down there, and there's all kinds of family sedans and semis, and it's a bummer. That used to be a fairly remote spot, just outside of San Felipe.
Yeah, hashtag van life.
Yeah. Oh, well, I had a friend of mine down in Cabo a couple of weeks ago tell me he calls it the Vandemic. Well, we were laughing about all we were laughing about all the Sprinter vans down in the East Cape of Cabo, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's the Vandemic."
I'm writing that one down. I love that.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? I totally took note of it myself. I got to use that. So I'm so happy I could do it here today.
Yeah, that's going to start a new trend. They have to put out stickers or something.
Yeah.
So we'll have to hashtag it. There you go.
Yeah.
What was the camera besides your little Minolta 110? What was the first real 35?
I had coincidentally I had Minoltas.
Okay.
They were a very popular brand back then for little 35 millimeter SLRs. And it just, I think primarily is because I think that's what my mom had. And so I got my own, and then, I could borrow her lenses. I don't even know if she had more than one, but, and they were really affordable in comparison to Nikon Fs or some of the, fancier cameras, but, essentially did the same thing. Back then it was really, the camera body itself was just a means to an end. There wasn't any crazy features on them until you started getting into motor drives and stuff like that. just the standard bodies all did pretty much the same thing, you know?
Right. I shot with
Um,
Olympus.
yeah, well, again, Olympus, I think was a similar mark to Minolta in terms of where they were on the scale of you know, the really expensive cameras versus the accessible ones. But yeah, those were great cameras too. And I just remember how excited I was because it was all metal and, you know, really had that very satisfying feel when you advance the film, and it just I felt like a big deal with that camera.
Did you shoot more regular film or did you shoot slide?
I think a little bit of both. Yeah, I think early on I recognized the that transparency, you know, slide film was what professionals shot, and so I wanted to, you know, I wanted to feel like a professional, and I thought it was fun to look at those, and then also recognize that you could put them into a slide projector and show your friends, you know. I think we had a slide projector at home too, which was perhaps maybe a little unusual for most families, although
Right.
they were very common. But yeah, I think probably a little bit of both. Um, and later, when I got a little more serious, it was probably almost 100% slide film. Um, I think somewhere in high school, I was the only class that I did good in, by the way, was my photography class. I had a very, um, you know, a 1 in a million photography teacher at San Clemente High School who was just unbelievably supportive of his students and involved and caring, and really nurtured a lot of people that I know that were in my class to pursue photography. But yeah, I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot in that period, but also did some workshops. So I went to Santa Fe and did some workshops with some actual professional photographers when I was really young. And then I just absorbed anything I get my hands on. You know, this is all pre-internet, obviously, but you know, books and things like that that actually covered real professional scenarios and what professional how I realized early that, you know, that you could make a living shooting advertising photography or magazines. You know, magazine photography and stock photography was a huge industry back then. It's almost crazy to even think that that's just pretty much gone. It doesn't even exist anymore.
And we thank the
But
internet.
yeah, sure. But no, I can't remember what the question was now. If there was a question in
Oh,
there, but
about the film choice.
yeah. No, I enjoyed 35 millimeter slide film primarily. Learned how to process it. One of the things that I learned at that summer camp in Catalina Island was that was my first experience in a dark room. Even before high school, I was doing that out there. I was scuba diving in the morning and shooting with either a little 110 Minolta. Actually, I guess that was snorkeling. And then once I started scuba diving, I was actually shooting with a Nikonos, which is Nikon's purpose-built underwater camera. I was shooting with 35 millimeter film, scuba diving, and then go into the darkroom and learned how to develop the film right there on the campus at Catalina Island. And yeah, then I think ever since then, I realized it wasn't that hard to do those processes if you just understood some basic principles. And especially doing the slide film, you didn't need, it wasn't like you were making a print. You didn't need a larger, you didn't need all the trays and the space that was required to do black and white printing. You just needed some little cans and chemicals and a couple thermometers, and that was it. You know, so yeah, I think 35 millimeter film or 35 millimeter slide film was really something that I enjoyed a lot.
Right.
Difficult to shoot, very difficult to shoot, as I'm sure you understand. Maybe probably a lot of people don't understand how simple photography has become. It used to be a craft that you really had to understand. You know, especially slide film is, you know, a third of a stop off. It was, you know, it was
You,
junk.
you blow it out.
It's just, yeah, there was no saving it. That was it. That was the end result. That was the difference between negative film and positive, you know, slide film was a negative film. You had an opportunity to make some corrections when you turned it from a negative to a positive in a print. You could fix some things. But with slide film, what you've got is what you got, man. And it was very finicky.
Yeah, and you couldn't bracketing back then, which was was huge. Was it not only was it expensive, but it was
Yes.
you couldn't do it in action photography because you couldn't set it up to have your camera shoot 3 photos, plus one zero and then
Yeah.
minus one. You had to manually make the adjustments yourself. So you had to
Yeah.
dial it in. I had a lot of Polaroids.
Yes. I loved Polaroids when I started getting into that realm, because it really was something that, especially when you're just starting out as a professional, it gave you some confidence. You're like, oh shit, okay, cool, that's a good exposure, Yeah,
Exactly.
check it out. But a lot of people may not understand that before digital, we used Polaroid backs on film cameras to proof and to check our exposure, check our lighting, and things like that. But that's what we're speaking of.
Exactly. And when did you start shooting? I'm sure you shoot in medium format at some point. When did you start doing that, and what was the camera choice then?
Um, I definitely had played around with medium format in a few times, primarily, I probably beginning in junior college. I went to Orange Coast College, which had a fantastic photography program there in Costa Mesa, California. Um, for a community college, it was one of the most revered photography programs, I think, in the nation. But I think that might have been the first place that I shot both medium format and large format, 2.25 film and 4x5 film. But certainly once I went on to a proper art school, it was a requirement. Um, and Hasselblad was my camera of choice, although I did a little later on get some vintage Rolleiflexes. In fact, I'm looking at my first one still sitting on a shelf right here in my office,
Nice.
which is a twin lens reflex. Rolleiflex is a very cool camera. I mean, it's a different way of shooting where you're looking down into the camera and out through one lens and shooting with another. But it's I think it really stripped away a lot of things about photography. Um, Although I think anything above 35 millimeter really got into a different realm anyways, but I loved that camera and using it.
I didn't shoot with a Hasselblad. I still have my Mamiya. The
Hmm.
the Pro 6.7, and
Yeah.
I haven't used it in years, but I looked at a digital back for it and was like, well, I can buy such a high quality camera complete
I, I, I
for the
think it's
same
hard to
price.
yeah, I think it's hard to justify these days. You know, in the very beginnings of digital photography, if you were a pro, you really needed to be shooting with one of those large format digital cameras because there just wasn't the pixel count and the quality in the smaller format. But now, boy, man, it's unbelievable, the capabilities, the technology that has spawned out of all that. That I don't think it's necessary at all. I mean, geez, look at what's capable with a phone.
Right.
Just because it's indicative, and there's still lots of guys that use them. A part of it might be a horse and pony show for their clients, but I'm there for sure. There's lots of quality considerations with medium format that can't be ignored. But in terms of majority of people, probably not necessary.
I walked away from photography. I was a when I graduated from Brooks, I moved back up to the San Francisco Bay Area and got a job with a advertising company called Paragon Productions, and it was kind of short lived. I was there about 6 months and then went on my own. But I used their studio for freelance work, which was good because the IRS finally came in and shut them down and locked everybody out. And
Huh.
luckily, I had all my equipment with me because I showed up to go use the studio for some product work, and the doors were chained, and there was these notices on on the windows saying, do not enter without, this IRS agent and stuff. And I was just so happy to already have my equipment, in the back of my my car at the time, because all the artists that were still there and stuff lost everything, at least for a couple of years while they tried to fight and had to show proof of purchase themselves that, all their drafting tables and everything that they used as for their part of the trade, were theirs and not the company's, which with my photography equipment would have just killed me, being, 35, the 2 1/4, and then, the 4x5 stuff, and all the lights and everything else I had at the time. I would have gotten, wiped out. But I was freelancing, and then digital, when digital first came out, it was just kind of a, to the true commercial photographers at the time, it was kind of a joke. And then the processes got a lot better. Adobe, Photoshop came out and really changed things, so where anybody that could use a computer could become a photographer. Because you could manipulate everything so much better and so much, so easily if you understood the process, with Adobe. And that depressed the hell out of me.
Yeah, well, in fact, Photoshop was out long before there was, and most people had any access to a digital camera. I learned Photoshop 1, I think it was, and when I was at Orange Coast College, I had a digital photography class, and in fact, I think before Photoshop, we worked on a different system, a Targa system. I can't remember the name of that platform, but that was, we took slides and we scanned them. And then later on, when I was in art school, we had cameras that were on loan to us from Kodak, and it was a 35 millimeter body that had this giant thing hanging off the bottom of it, and it shot digital photos that really were kind of a joke, but they were a quick pathway to getting your work into a computer. You just immediately went right to the computer, and certainly foreshadowing to what eventually photography would be. But yeah, I agree. The original digital cameras were kind of a novelty. I mean, we all took turns playing with that thing. Went, oh, okay, all right, that's cool. Yeah, here you can have it back.
Yeah, because I did so much of my work, was, well, I did a lot of product work, and for catalogs and stuff like that, and advertisements, magazine ads and newspaper ads. You remember when newspapers were big, or magazines, and it was, I could take that product, and between the lighting and then what I could do, in the processing, I could create something that was to me phenomenal. Then I realized that when digital was coming out and somebody could just take the picture and not worry about the lighting much, and then jump on the laptop or the computer, not a laptop then, but, jump on their computer and then manipulate the hell out of it and bring in objects that, if we wanted to do a replica of, here's the moon behind, a waterfall or something like that, it was like, there was a hell of a process to do it. When with the computer, it made it so easy. And I was like, okay, this is bullshit. I'm not reinvesting, at that time I probably had $45,000 or $50,000 worth of camera equipment, between the lights and everything, and I just said, I'm done. And I quit.
Well, I had clients who would call me up when they would get my FedEx envelope after a job was complete and go, hey, dude, you can't send this film anymore. That they were just insisting that, listen, those days are over. We don't want film anymore. We're just about ready to unplug the scanners and throw them in the dumpster. You got to make the transition. Everyone else is doing it. And And then, admittedly, the transition to digital photography happened before it was better than film. It happened before it was anywhere near equal. It was merely a matter of economics and convenience at that point. That it was cheaper. It was cheaper for them to just take files and go right into the whatever medium or whatever format that your photography was going to appear. It was easier. And so for them, it just made sense. And it took a while also for photographers to pass on those costs to their clients as well. I used to charge nearly $40 a roll for a roll of film to my clients. And when we switched over to digital, nobody knew how to charge for that. So the benefactor of that indecision was all the magazines and clients that didn't get charged for that. But it didn't take long for us to figure out, that there's a digital fee or digital processing fee or now it's post-production fees are pretty standard. But it was interesting time back then, because it was an unhappy time to be a photographer, because you more often than not were disappointed with the results you got out of those cameras in comparison to what you're used to with real film. So
Yeah, what I found is some of my standard clients that I'd had for 2-3 years and shooting their catalogs every year, all of a sudden they had somebody in house with a digital camera that was now their photography expert. And it was and then I'd see their catalogs come out, and I was like, this sucks. You guys went from this to this, and couldn't convince them otherwise.
I think, for good or for bad, it has taken that learning curve and, nearly flattened it out, because, like we were talking about, when you had the time between you shot and between you actually saw the images come back from the lab, it took a while for you to learn something. You didn't learn something until you saw that film, you saw your results, and you were able to judge what you did.
Right.
Whereas now it's in real time. And it's a whole lot easier to learn things that way. But it's also made it a lot more accessible. You don't need to know as much in terms of technical. Sure, there's lots of stuff you need to learn, but not like when it was film.
True. What was the photography that you did once you graduated to make it a living?
Oh, well, I think we missed a very, very pivotal part of my life.
Okay.
And that was when you mentioned Brooks Institute. When I was in high school, our photography teacher used to take us to Brooks Institute on field trips.
Oh, okay.
To show us. And I think, his motivation was to show us, hey, there is pathways for you to make a living as a photographer, that this is a legitimate profession, and that there are very serious schools that train photographers, and that you can learn photography in a commercial sense. And so he took us to Santa Barbara to go see Brooks. And I think I went on at least 2 of those field trips and became enamored with that school. So when you said you graduated from there, I understand what a big deal that is. That was a very, very, it was one of the most highest regarded schools of photography in the country, maybe perhaps in the world. But so then fast forward a little bit further, I learned of a place called Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And I think I had visited Art Center one time, and the difference between Art Center and Brooks Institute is that Art Center had all disciplines of art, not just photography. And when I went and visited there, I felt I was immediately inspired by all the other art that was being made and that was happening in that building. And it was a very, very, and still is a very special place. And I decided that I wanted to go to the Art Center. Couldn't afford it. Thought it was a pipe dream. I ended up going on a program called Semester at Sea, which was I learned about it in a photography magazine. there was an article about a college professor, photography professor, who went on semester at sea and taught students photography. And that was what the article was about this professor and about this dream job. And the whole time reading the article, I was like, okay, never mind this guy or this person. What is this semester at sea? And at that point, I had gone and backpacked through Europe a couple times on my own with a skateboard. My original plan, the first time I went to Europe, was I was going to go and skate all these famous skate ramps and parks in Europe, and I ended up ditching my board underneath a bunk bed in a hostel. I think in the first week I was there, I left my pads and my skateboard underneath the bed and just left them because I realized that there was more to see. There was a lot more to learn than just going and doing what I did at home. So I ditched my skateboard and went and did these trips in Europe. I did a couple of them, and I became infatuated with travel and just couldn't get enough of it. And so when I read this article about semester at sea, I was like, oh, wait, what? I could go around the world on a ship and learn photography at the same time. So I applied for that and got in, and somehow was able to afford it. I did work study on the ship, and I had a cabin that was just the tiniest shoebox with a bed, and shared it with another guy. And but the work and they had a dark room in the belly of the ship. And what we would do is we started in Vancouver, ended up in Fort Lauderdale. So we went all the way around the world, and a whole semester of college. You got a semester of college units from University of Pittsburgh, and every day you were at sea, you did classes, except for Sundays. So, if there was a 2-week passage, which we had 2 of those, where it was actually 2 weeks without land, we went to school every single day for 6 days. And they had classrooms on the ship. They had, multi-purpose rooms where they did big shipboard meetings and all kinds of stuff. They had a bar that was open. We were in international waters. All the 18-year-old kids went nuts. Even had a swimming pool. We were in calm waters. They'd fill it with ocean water. And anyhow, we would go into port, and then you would have X amount of time to go do whatever. You could just sleep on the ship and go out during the day, or you could actually put a backpack on and even jump on an airplane and go somewhere close by, as long as you're back to the ship in order to get on it when it left. And, I would shoot all these amazing places. I actually had an architecture class, and for my term paper, I decided I was going to shoot as many of the 7 wonders of the world that I could. In terms of architecture, I did a paper on the architecture of these structures and photographed them. And that would be like Angkor Wat and the pyramids and the Great Wall of China and things like that. But also just lots of very cool travel stuff. I mean, I went to places that back then were crazy to go to. As a seasoned correspondent, they would be crazy to go to, and here we were just students. I mean, I went to Cambodia when nobody went to Cambodia. It was a scary place, and Pol Pot was still alive, and we were advised before we got off the ship not to go there. And every time they told us not to do something, that's exactly what we did.
Right.
Do not go to Cambodia. Okay, we're going to Cambodia. Do not go to the north side of the island in Sri Lanka. That's where the Tamil tigers are. As soon as we got off the ship, that's exactly what we did. Do not climb the pyramid. I was like, you can climb the pyramid? Sure enough, 2:00 in the morning, we climbed the top of the pyramid, all that kind of stuff. But the photographs, I digress. I could tell stories all day about that journey. It was amazing. Changed my life for sure. But the photographs that I shot and the portfolio I produced on that trip is what got me into Art Center. I had this really, really cool portfolio of amazing travel photography, again, very exotic, crazy fucking places that nobody went to. And that got me into Art Center. And I had aspirations to be a National Geographic photographer or Condé Nast something. I wanted to shoot those kinds of magazines. And that's what got me into Art Center. And I got this really crazy envelope in the mail, and it was this really, of course, very, very high-end designed package that came in the mail. It was this translucent foil, and you could see through it. It said congratulations. I could tell when I was walking from the mailbox. It said congratulations. I could see it inside there. I was like, holy crap, I got accepted to this school, because I knew that they only accepted, 1 out of 50 or 100 people that applied. It was something crazy like that. And I couldn't believe I got accepted. And then I was like, well, this sucks, because I can't afford to go there, because it was very, and still is, very expensive place to go. And it wasn't until I went and met with some guidance counselors there and financial aid people, when they were like, it's okay, all you got to do is sign here. you know and I actually took my mom was very, she was very good. She couldn't afford to really help me, but she was smart enough to get me to attend some workshops on how to navigate the financial aid system. And that was really, really helpful in how to work that system, and how to work it into your benefit, and take advantage of everything you have in terms of your financial position and your background to get the most financial aid that you could. And I went in there and signed my life away. And I admittedly only just recently paid off those student loans. They were they were 25-year mortgages, basically.
Wow.
I could have gone to medical school for what it cost to go there. And that was even with, I started out with some decent, basic financial aid, but I applied for all the scholarships, the internal school scholarships, and I actually had a benefactor about halfway through my time there, that my tuition was completely paid for by some very generous philanthropist who paid my tuition. But it was a great place. I mean, it was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Again, talk about pivotal moments. I think that semester at Sea Trip, and then going to Art Center just changed everything. I learned and saw things and it was like photography boot camp too. I'm sure Brooks was very similar.
Yes.
We weren't allowed to touch anything other than a 4x5 camera for the first year and a half or something like that. Even to the point where we had 1 gallon of D76 film developer that we had to maintain. We weren't allowed to mix a fresh batch. We had to keep this single gallon and run control strips with a densitometer and replenish it, and keep it, it looked like mud at the end of the semester. But and if you cheated, the instructors there were very, very smart, and they would find out, and you would get in trouble, get demerits. In fact, my black and white instructor was a gentleman named, I'm struggling to remember his first name, but it was Mr. Can, and he was very, very involved with developing black and white processes, and in fact helped Ansel Adams in developing the cold head light enlarger and all this other stuff. But they had amazing faculty there. And in fact, I met an instructor there who, back up just a little bit. One of the things about Art Center is that it is the premier school for transportation design, meaning that the majority of car designers, automobile designers who design the automobiles themselves, all come from Art Center. They're the number one school for training transportation design people. So that was kind of a sign of things to come too. But one of my instructors who taught location photography, he was in automobile photography from Southern California, and he was an instructor there. And I was kind of enamored with what he did. And his background is very similar to mine. He was from Huntington Beach, and he was a surfer, and he talked like me and sounded like me, and we kind of hit it off. And I was always kind of his teacher's pet, and helped with all demonstrations, helped him set up lights and everything. And when I had a semester off, I asked if he had any work, if I could come work, sweep his floors or whatever in his studio. And he's like, oh yeah, why don't you come on down and we'll get you involved. And I came to his studio in Costa Mesa, and when I walked in the door, there was that year's winning Le Mans Porsche sports car was sitting in his studio. ready to be shot.
Wow.
And I had just seen it at the auto show, and you weren't allowed to touch it or anything or get close to it at the auto show. And then the first thing he said was, "Oh, why don't you go out in there to the cove and you know, clean the windows and straighten the seat belts and all this stuff, get ready to shoot it." And I was like, wow, I get to touch this thing and climb around in it. And I was hooked. I mean, I was it just, you know, I kind of came full circle. I've always loved cars. And then I learned, fuck, I can make a living shooting automobiles. This is so cool. This is the coolest thing. And it combined a lot of the things I loved about photography, or a lot of things that I loved: automobiles, photography, action. You know, a lot of automobile photography is action photography, much like I was shooting skateboarding and surfing. And so, yeah, I was hooked. And I ended up, when I graduated, I ended up going to work for him full time as a third assistant or something. I worked my way up eventually to be his first assistant, and then an associate shooter for him. And after some time, I actually was a partner in that studio. And he's, you know, speaking of the masterpiece of metal that I used to shoot for Dirt Sports, that was really inspired by that same shoot he was doing for the Porsche. Was for Racer magazine. They had a center spread called In Focus, and I learned how to shoot cars like that, like you saw in Masterpiece of Metal. Really was something I learned from him, and it was really in the same vein. So yeah, that's how that happened. And I never looked back. I had, you know, I met a lot of people in the industry, in, you know, the automobile space, editorial space, magazines, etc., through that job, that relationship with him. And it wasn't until some time later when I met a gentleman named Marty Fiolka, where I really started to, you know, find a pathway into off-road. My first professional, call it, job shooting off-road racing was the 1998 Baja 1000, I think.
Okay.
I think that was it. Maybe even earlier than that. But yeah, it turned out that I realized that there wasn't a lot of really high-end photographers or a lot of proficient photographers shooting on a kind of an advertising level in off-road. And I thought I would take my skills that I learned. You know, when I first went out on my own, I was shooting a lot of Indy cars. I was shooting sports car racing. I was shooting drifting. I shot lots of Japanese tuner stuff for like Super Street and things like that. I went to Japan quite a bit. And then, you know, off-road racing thing was just, it really brought, you know, yet another passion of mine. You know, I loved driving off-road. You know, that Toyota truck I told you about, I beat that thing off-road every chance I could get, and was enamored with off-road racing as a young kid. So again, it just, you know, brought so much joy to be able to go and make a living doing that, albeit not a great living, but, you know, there certainly isn't the same kind of money in that as there was in, say, you know, Indy cars or, you know, some of the other formulas of motorsport. But yeah, I loved it so much.
And your time into the magazine industry, was that where did you get your start there?
Well, for sure, I shot a bit for Racer magazine. Again, as you know, my relationship with Rick, his name's Rick Grace, who owned that studio, and he shot a lot for Racer, and there was, you know, they threw me a bone here or there. Then I was shooting a fair bit for Auto Week. It became a very kind of a regular gig for me, was Auto Week. And then, like I said, some of the Japanese tuner magazines, the European car, Super Street, and things like this.
So freelancing.
Yeah, oh yeah, everything was freelance.
Okay.
Everything was freelance. And then, you know, fast forward again with my relationship with Marty, we started out as, you know, a client and photographer relationship and professional relationship. And then we became fast friends. And he approached me with, you know, the idea that he had with Jim Ryan to start Dirt Sports. And yeah, so then that's how that came about. Which was, again, very, very cool. I mean, Marty and I were both enamored with the quality of Racer magazine, and, you know, why wasn't there something like that at that level for off-road racing, with very, very thoughtful articles that were well written and well photographed and and very, very sensible design and things like that. So that was, kind of the creative brief for dirt sports.
Perfect. And at Motor Trend, did that were you an employee of Motor Trend, or did you? Because I
No,
saw that
I
you
was
were an
never,
editor, but you were just a
I was
contributing
not.
editor.
I was not. It's funny because I'm guessing you Googled me, because I do
Of
remember
course.
seeing that in a Google search. I wasn't, I don't, I was never an editor, but I did shoot for a lot of the Motor Trend books. Certainly shot for, over the years, I probably shot for just about it. Most of those books back then:
Okay.
Road and Track, Motor Trend, Truck Trend, Four Wheeler, you name it. I shot for all, especially a lot of the back then Peterson books. But I was never an editor, never full time for any of them.
Okay. And from your contact and dirt sports with Marty, did you? That's really when the whole media side of it. Um, what I'm getting at now is your relationship with Godfrey and Dusty Times. You're shooting for dirt sports. How did you end up with Dusty Times?
Okay.
That's a
Well,
long
I
time
think
in there.
there is. I think it's important to transition to something else that I has become a very big part of my life, and that's racing my vintage Bronco. Um, a friend of mine, and actually someone I a business person I did business with, it was a graphic designer. Him and I worked a lot together on projects, and him and I were both these kind of guys that were enamored with motorsports and were involved on a professional level from a media side of things and design side of things, but we weren't involved from a racing side, other than being there, or attending those races and chasing them, things like that. But Mike Perlman announced that he was bringing back Nora, and it was a vintage race, and the format was announced and all that, and it sounded very attainable for guys like us. And we're like, shit, this would be cool. We should find an old truck and go and try and do that. And we decided, well, fuck, we should get an old Bronco. That would be really cool. And that's what we did. We searched high and low, and back then, early Broncos were very affordable. Nobody really wanted them, so there was lots of them to be had. And we were looking for something that was kind of racy. We went as far north as Northern California and Pismo Beach, and looked at some. Finally, I found this one on Craigslist in San Diego. The irony was, it was only like 10 miles from where my then partner, the graphic designer, where he lived. We've been looking so far and wide for these things, and the one I ended up finding was right in his backyard. And we bought it for just, in today's money, just absolutely stole it. And it looked really racy, but it wasn't really a full race car, and needed a lot of stuff. And yeah, that's how Nora started, but or now how we got involved in Nora to begin with. But eventually, we ended up parting ways with that truck, and I ended up buying him out, and now didn't have a partner. And at the time, Brian Godfrey worked for Fox, and he'd been helping us out with some shocks. And we were at some event, some industry event. I think it was at the Oakley building, and there was an open bar. And over some drinks, Brian had come up to me, and I didn't really know him that well. He'd come up to me and say, "Oh, how's that Cactus Crusher?" And we started talking and laughing and having a good time, and realized that we really clicked and enjoyed hanging out with each other. And so before the night was over, I asked him if he wanted to come race with me, and he was like, "Well, hell yeah." And not even recognizing that he actually had been involved in a lot of trophy truck racing, and his family was deeply involved in off-road racing, and he brought a wealth of knowledge to our stupid little race program that really transformed it, some different level. But I guess fast forward again in terms of Dusty Times, when Brian went through a couple of different positions at a couple of different companies, and ended up at Method Race Wheels and Custom Wheelhouse with Kevin Fitzgerald and Bud, and I'd done work for them. I was doing advertising photography for them, and I'd been on several wide open Baja trips with Kevin and Bud over the years, back when they were involved with KMC. But they called me into their office and said they wanted to share something with me, and they said that they had the Dusty Times name and the URL, and we should do a brand book with this. We should do something cool with this. And I was like, well, dude, you have that? I mean, I was like, we absolutely got to do something on another level. And I was, at this time, there was, the magazines were dying off, but really the only things that were really thriving or that were getting any attention were these really high-end magazines, much like Surfer's Journal. And there were some motorcycle ones and a couple others that were just really, really nice books. And I think that the concept of that was smart, that if you were going to do something in print, then it had to be on a really, really high level in terms of the quality of the paper and the printing and the presentation and the content, that it has to be something special, or really you couldn't justify it, right?
Right.
So that was what I brought to them and said, we should do something really, really cool and do I called it a magazine back then, but it's evolved into a book, an annual book now. Thankfully, they all shared a similar vision, and that they believed in those types of passion projects, and were willing to stick their necks out to do it. And to this day still, and it's not a cheap thing to do. There isn't any money to be made in it, admittedly. But
Preaching to the choir.
But it is an effective marketing piece in many ways. And it is, really, it's as much a gift to the community than anything, really, in that, we exist in this space, this really, cool, group of, amazing group of individuals, and amazing technology and amazing locations, doing these extraordinary things, racing these cars, in these crazy environments. And it wasn't just racing too. I mean, it's really the lifestyle that kind of that crosses over in the periphery of desert racing, call it. There's also rally racing. There's also people who use 4x4s for recreation, and all the other things that are very similar, and that a lot of those people share as a passion, that we could just roll into this one presentation. And really, that's what Dusty Times is all about.
Yeah, taking it from what it was, with just being I'm not sure how often they did it, but it seemed like it was almost weekly newspaper.
It was monthly.
Monthly, okay. Monthly newspaper, and because I can remember submitting articles when I owned Vora, and had a couple of photographers that would follow the Vora, and we'd get photos down to them, and we'd get the articles in about the races. And to take it now full circle to where it's just this outstanding coffee table great presentation periodical is just awesome.
Well, I have to say it was daunting, and what Dusty Times used to be was not lost on me. And what it was a revered publication, perhaps the only one that was dedicated to desert racing almost exclusively, although they did cover other forms of formulas of off-road motorsport rally and et cetera, even mud bogs and stuff like that. But I remember it when I was, like I said, trying to make my Toyota pickup truck look like Ivan Stewart. I used to go to those shops where they sold stuff and had shocks hanging out on the wall to oogle at those things and dream about parts I couldn't afford. And one of the things I regularly did was pick up a Dusty Times. They always had them in the little rack there at those shops. And I love to get Dusty Times to go and then go to the back and look in the classifieds and dream about, oh shoot, look at, you can buy these off-road race cars. I remember it, and I do recognize how important it was to the community. And again, I think part of me wanted to reinvigorate that, having something that was dedicated to this community. And it was scary because I knew that a lot of people were going to go, oh, you can't do that. And then some people did say that you can't take Dusty Times and call it Dusty Times. This isn't Dusty Times. But I think hopefully over the years now that people have come to realize that we do hopefully do the name justice, but in a different way.
Right. Yeah. I think you did. I think you guys have. How many have you put out now?
5.
5. Okay.
So 5 years, and it's crazy when we did the issue 5 last year. Also, it just blows me away how time flies by. It's like, wow, we've done 5 years of this, and it's a fairly I'm overstating this ridiculously, but it's a huge effort. It's just myself and a designer friend of mine, and we do it all ourselves. Obviously I leaned on some contributors. In the beginning, it was almost exclusively everything. I did everything, wrote it, shot it, but that became very evident early on that wasn't sustainable. So, and also I didn't want it to be about me. I think back then I don't think I could have got people to do stuff for next to nothing just because they knew what the heck this project was. But now I think people understand and are eager to want to do stuff with us. So it's become, now it's a lot of contributors, which is awesome because I love getting just as much of other people's vision and perspective in it.
That's great. That's what we try to do with our magazine. It's not about us or even the rock crawling, which is where my heart is at. It's about the enthusiast, and I look for those enthusiasts that are like, say they're posting up, hey, I'm going to this Jeep run, or I'm going to go do this trail, and I'll shoot them a message and say, hey, do you want to, do you have a camera? You going to take pictures while you're out there? Don't write about it just on Facebook. Let me know. We'll publish it.
Yeah.
And it's working out really well doing that. It's the magazine industry has totally changed since the big ones have gone away, and but I think it's still viable. It's a different market.
It is. And again, I think, the reason why you guys still do a print version, correct?
Correct. Only print. Yep.
Only print. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and the fact that it still exists is indicative of the quality of it. It must be because I truly believe that only good books still exist, because it's a big ask for a consumer to go and either go to a bookstore, which are also a dying breed, and buy a magazine, or find a newsstand that carries magazines and buy an actual magazine and haul it around and open it up and look at it. But it has become something extraordinary. Whereas it used to be so ordinary, now it is extraordinary.
Right.
Everything's viewed on a phone or some sort of a screen these days, and to have an actual printed piece, it has to be kind of extraordinary for people to go to the lengths to acquire that, to get that, and to want to have that, right? So, I mean, that's really, I think, it's a shame. I still love to go to the bookstore and thumb through magazines I have no intention of buying, because I would love all of them. I would love to walk out there with all of them. And I still do. If I go to the bookstore, it's inevitable I'm going to walk out with 2 or 3 magazines, and then I bring them home and I might flip through it once, and then I put them in a big stack, and I'm staring at stacks of magazines in my office right now. That it's kind of ridiculous in this day and age, but I love them. I love the feel of the paper. I love sitting and looking at the printing and trying to figure out, what process they use for various things. And, that's one of the things that we decided early on at Dusty Times, that the printing would be extraordinary, and that we had to, find the edges in terms of capabilities of printing presses and techniques and things to add that extra special something to the book, where people would go, oh wow, I've never seen that, or this, wow, that's super cool, this is tactile, I can rub my hands on this and feel that embossing, things like that. And in fact, a funny slash not funny story is that my partner and I in Dusty, Brett McMillan, is a very, very talented designer who I met when I was working on Kawasaki account. I did Kawasaki for years, and he was one of the art directors at the agency that had Kawasaki. So we met there, and he went on to work for many other really big brands after that. And I approached him with this project, and he was like, hell yeah, dude, this sounds amazing. Let's do this. And neither of us had any experience in magazine production. Obviously, he designed many layouts of things that got printed, and I for sure shot lots of stuff that went into magazines, but we didn't know anything about going and hiring a printer. I did have some classes about 4-color printing at Art Center, where I learned lots about the process itself, but never actually done it. And we hired a printer to print the issue 1 of Dusty Times, and the palette of magazines showed up, and opened the box and pulled out the magazine, and my jaw hit the floor, because it was so bad. It was so not what we envisioned. It was just, the quality was just not there, and we were crushed to the point where we decided that we were going to use our own money and reprint it. And so that initial run of magazines all ended up in a dumpster somewhere.
Wow.
And we, at great expense, I might add, we reprinted the whole run with our own money. And we ended up finding a printer. As soon as we visited them, I was convinced these are our guys. We walked into this plant, and they're in Southern California too, which was, I think, critical for us, because we wanted to be involved to the point where we would show up there. So picking a place that was local was important. And they had one part of their printing, the big giant room with the huge printing presses. One part of it was, they had giant ceilings, 30-foot ceilings or something. There was this huge black curtain that was around an entire portion of their facility. And like, oh, sorry, I'd love to show you that machine. It's a really, really cool machine in there. I said, but we're printing some stuff for Apple that you can't see. I was like, oh shit, these guys print Apple stuff. And, then everything we saw, we were taking our tour, there was just, high-end car brochures for Cadillac and stuff for Disneyland and all the movie studios. And I was like, okay, these are our guys, so, and we've been with them ever since. They're just amazing printers. And I love going to press check. I go to all the press checks, and every time we've got our theme for the magazine, or I still say magazine, it really isn't a magazine, but every time we have our theme for the book, we go down there and meet with our print salesmen and ask him. I say, hey, what, you guys got any new processes? And he's like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you this we've been working on. And inevitably we end up doing something kind of definitely different, or kind of cutting edge, or in some ways risky. Issue 4, which was the issue that had the Joe Gibbs motor on the cover, that's got like a holographic foil that we printed on top of. That was something kind of experimental they were messing around with, and thought it was appropriate because it seemed like the shimmer you see when oil hits water. but things like that. And we always try to, find something that we can add in, something that normally you would just cut out because it's expensive, but we try to make sure that we leave something in terms of budget to do something that's really cool, or something that's unexpected, or something that gives it that tactile feel, and we spend a lot of effort in picking papers and like I said, going to the press checks and making sure everything's perfect, and really leaning into the expertise of these guys of what is really a dying craft. I mean, these guys are dudes that there may not be a new generation of guys who know how to run 4-color print presses, or that know how to do that stuff on that kind of level.
Right. So, what is your distribution model?
Our distribution model, I mean, admittedly, we give most of them away. Really, it's become something of a corporate gift. And, part of my original creative brief for Dusty Times was that I was very inspired by the Pirelli calendar and what they had done with a high-end printed piece, and that it was an annual, and that it was a select mailing list that nobody knows how to get on it, but everyone wants to be on it, and everyone wants to receive this thing in the mail. So that was something that I was very inspired by, and wanted to somehow have that incorporated, something like that incorporated. And that we do a every issue, every year we do a what we call the VIP box, and it is a list of industry people, um, business partners, key people within our space that are on this list. And they get this box in the mail that has, in the box is, again, my vision for that was that the box itself was, receiving that box was the beginning of the experience. And so the box needed to be identifiable from, in the stack of mail, that you would see it and they would immediately go, oh, cool, the new Dusty Times is here. I got the box. I wanted that to be a whole experience, much like the Pirelli calendar. They do a similar thing where it comes in some really elaborate packaging, and it is a whole experience to open that up and get to the calendar itself. That again was the inspiration for it. So the VIP box is a box that has identifying marks on the outside, and when you open it up, immediately the experience continues with the magazine in die cut foam, and then underneath there's some sort of a gift or an item that is on theme for the magazine. And the very first one, as an example, had a little ditty bag, or a little a bug out bag type thing that had little items in it that all related to the content in the magazine. When you unzipped it and opened it up, it had a Baja map that actually was able to get National Geographic maps to print a custom Baja map that had Dusty Times on the cover of it in our own design. And it was a Baja map. And then there was a snake bite kit, and there was a highlighter that we got Sharpie to put Dusty Times on, and customize a highlighter because we had a story about rally navigation and how using a highlighter is very key in that, or used to be. Now it's become digital, but so over the years, this box has become something that people look forward to receiving, and I still every year get calls, hey, am I on the list? It's worked out just kind of the way I'd hoped it would. But that's part of the distribution. We obviously sell them online because we want them to be accessible to people, but we can't afford to give them away to everyone. So you can purchase them, and I'm grateful for the people that do, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy that people are willing to buy it. We also give away quite a few at Ormhoff. We have the last few years, at least, at Ormhoff, because that is a very special group of people that gather at that banquet, and want to make sure that we could share that with them.
We appreciate that.
We've done, different races. We put them in I've made arrangements to put them in the driver's bags of different races over the years. Really, the distribution model is we want people to have this. We want people to experience it and to get it in their hands, and it doesn't do any good sitting on a shelf in a warehouse. This isn't some commodity that needs to be counted and distributed in that sense. I don't believe, it's something that we hope that people will enjoy, and we want as many people to see it as possible, and many people to enjoy it as possible across our entire space, and hopefully people outside of our space that can appreciate it. And I think that I hope, the hope is that even if you don't know anything about off-road racing, you have zero interest in off-road lifestyle, or you're not an enthusiast in this segment, that you can appreciate at Dusty Times because of what it is, because of, wow, this is cool. Again, I haven't seen a book like this, and you could appreciate the photography, you can appreciate the writing, you can appreciate the design and the printing. So I think it has broad appeal, even outside of our space, I would hope. But it is, again, I'm very, very fortunate that people share that vision and share that enthusiasm for a piece like this, because it doesn't make any sense in a business sense, really. But it's indicative of the folks at Custom Wheelhouse and their passion for what we do, and for the products that we make that serve this community. That this is indicative of that we're not just producing stuff that we don't care about, or don't care about the usage, or the enthusiasts that use them. We really are as passionate about this as the people in the community.
Excellent. That's admirable. I find that to be true in our community. For the most part, there are, of course, there's always going to be companies or people out there that are just, that never had a passion for off-road, but have realized that maybe they're really good at marketing or whatever, and have stepped up and, done the SEO properly or whatever, because that's what their background is. But for the most part, the companies that are out there were founded on the passion of the industry.
Yeah, I think it's reflective of the people in our space. We as off-roaders we're a very generous lot of guys and gals. It's a very common story to hear about someone who's having some difficulty at some place somewhere, some far off place, and are in a pinch, and someone steps up that they may not even know or never even met before, that is willing to give them the shirt off their back to help them out. And it's a story you hear over and over and over again. So I think this is kind of reflective of that.
Perfect. Yep. Well, Boyd, I want to say thank you so much for coming out and, willing to be a guest on Conversations, and I've really appreciated it. And I hope to catch up with you somewhere, somehow again, and sit and have another chat. This has been great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on this show, Rich. And it was great. It's fun. I love telling stories.
That's obvious, and it was you're very good at it. You're very good at it. So,
well, thank you.
Besides being a great photographer, you're a great storyteller. So that's those are key things to have in your arsenal. So, question: are you going to be able to make it to the Ormhoff Gala this year? It's in September.
I hope to. I thoroughly enjoyed that event. It's just, boy, I'm always in awe to be in that room. There's so many legends. There's so many great people, and it is like a big family. And so, yeah, I hate to miss it. So there's been some times I couldn't, but I hope to this year for sure.
Great. Hope to see you there. And Boyd,
okay, Rich,
have a great day, and thank you so much.
Cool. You too, Rich. Thank you.
Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.